So, Mum, I phoned you about my research that I'm doing on authentic leadership, and I was explaining that in order to be an authentic leader, I think it's important to think about where your values come from when you're a child. And I was talking to you about whether or not you felt that it was important to me as a child to be listened to, and what your memories were of that. So do you just want to tell me what you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably all children have a sort of built-in desire to be heard, to have their views heard. But I think perhaps your circumstances, because although you were very young, you had experienced things that most children don't. You had been in short-term foster care. You probably had vague memories of that, and then suddenly you've been taken away from your mum and dad and put in a new home. And I think in many ways, at one level, that made you a bit more mature than perhaps the average 3.5-year-olds. And you were, after your initial shyness, you were quite articulate. And of course you did have the regular visits from social workers who were always careful to listen to you and to seek your views on things.
And you were talking about where your values came from to encourage me to be listened to. You were talking about your mum.
Well, yes. My mother was always very respectful towards children, even quite small children, so that they would always feel that she was listening to them and really paying attention to them and valuing their feelings and their views. And I think that was a very good role model, really.
And you were saying that even sort of at age 5, when there was a sort of may have gone to court for me to be to go back and live with my parents. That somebody came and spoke to me.
Yes.
And sort of.
Yes.
I can't really remember that person, but when you told me that.
They appointed somebody to act as guardian ad litem, and her responsibility was to come and talk to you prior to the matter going to court, to try to establish what was best for you, what you wanted. So yes, that.
And were you in that room at that time? Was that just the?
I don't think so. I think that these were meetings. I think we were out of the room. So there was no possibility of us influencing the or directing the conversation.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting that there was a lot of they really did work in a way that made sure that they listened to me.
Yes.
And even at that young age. Yeah. And I think I was sort of always felt that I was listened to by you and Dan. I remember having quite adult conversations really when I was quite young, just about. I remember we used to watch programs about things like racism and things, and having those kind of conversations. And I suppose I didn't realise it at the time, but that was quite adult kind of things to talk about. But you and Dad never stopped me from talking about things. And
well, I think you had an opinion on.
I did have a lot of opinions.
and so yes, and so these sort of things would generate conversations.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that was interesting for me was that I sort of remembered slightly different things. So I remember going to court and you and Dad taking me to the court, and it didn't end up going to court, but talking to my social worker, my long-term social worker when I was little was Mr. Herringshaw, and sort of saying to him that I remember saying I would curtsy to the judge and say that I didn't mind where I lived as long as my brothers didn't mind, and that was what I decided. But I suppose I was talking about it with Tamsin, one of my friends, and saying, that actually it showed that was very much my family, really. And although age 5, I perhaps didn't really understand all the consequences, but it was there that I was very much part of the family.
Yes, I think if in an ideal world, from your point of view, if we could all have lived together,
I think that would have been my
both
ideal
parents
world.
and family all living together.
Yes. It was almost like divorced parents in a way. For me, it was more like everybody was everybody was my family,
Yeah.
but it obviously couldn't ever be that everyone lived together. And I suppose we never sort of talked about, but what was it like for you having? Did you find me strange, or did you find that quite easy to sort of?
As far as I could recall, you fitted in to the
Mm.
family very quickly.
Yeah.
There was a sort of 24-hour period where you were very withdrawn and not really saying anything, and then after that, you thawed out, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we felt as if we'd known you for a long time. Well, we met you several times before
Oh,
you
okay.
actually came to.
I vaguely remember that.
Yes,
It's very
you've
little.
just brought over for Dave,
Yeah.
a visit.
I think most of it I remember being ill in the car, but
Yeah.
and the other thing was about social workers coming, because I suppose it must have been funny, or it must have been strange for you having all these different people come in and sort of listening to my opinion. Did you find that easy to?
Well, yes, it wasn't a problem because we knew that that was going to have
Yeah.
to happen. I think there were restrictions on you that wouldn't have applied to
Yeah.
our other children, in that we couldn't just say, yes, okay, Sonia, fine, you can go and stay the night at so and so's house.
Yeah.
Things like that
Yeah. I used to
always
get
had
very
to be
frustrated. by
always
that.
had to be checked through the
Yeah.
through the social services, and
Yeah.
that was a bit limiting, really. But it was to protect you, obviously.
Yeah. And I remember do you remember me that I became a co-opted member of the Social Services Board when I was 16?
Yes.
And David Joannides, the director of
Yes,
Social Services,
yes,
came and
mm.
visited.
Yes.
And actually that was one of the big things I said on that board, was how difficult it was as a foster child to have that role.
Well, it always underlined that
Yeah.
that your situation was different.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the time you could get on with your life, and it wasn't very apparent. But things like that certainly made it apparent.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Mum. Thanks, Dad.
Well, some of that would be helpful.
Yeah.